Another Wednesday is come and gone, and I've got some comics. Let's talk about them. Hey, welcome to 9 Panel Grid. This week we've seen the continuation of the fall of Krakoa, a tyrannical future set in the Marvel Universe, and top-tier creators putting out some new indie work. But we're going to start this week with Immortal Thor number 8 by Al Ewing and Ibram Roberson. Now, this is the first issue of Thor that we've seen that actually has a new artist taking the reins here, which is quite the feat considering that this is issue 8. Ibram, though, has kept the same level of quality that we've seen issue over issue, and it's quite astonishing, to be completely honest with you. It took me a couple, tries to look at this and say, hey, is this someone new? Is this the same art team that's happening that we've seen over and over? It's been really refreshing to see. On top of that, colorist Matthew Wilson really puts his best foot forward here. Every panel is filled with these sickly green hues that are coming off of the gods that Thor is encountering here. And anytime that he has to ignite Mjolnir, the electricity just crackles through the panels here. It's great. Now, Al Ewing is known to be a little bit verbose at times, but I'm happy to say that the story continues to keep pace with everything that we've seen previously. It's kind of nice with an immortal being like Thor. He needs some kind of stakes to be humbled, right? And that's what makes him a character that we can relate to and a character that we're going to be entertained by and see issue after issue. So, Immortal Thor, fantastic issue. I highly recommend it. Okay, next up we have Ultimate Black Panther by Brian Edward Hill and Stefano Caselli. Now, this is the continuation of what we've been seeing in the Ultimate Universe here, which has been really, really refreshing. I've been very happy to see exactly what's been going on here and how they're progressing the story and making it so much different than the original Ultimate Universe that we had seen previously. The biggest factor that comes with this book in particular is that Brian Edward Hill writes like a director. You can tell that he leaves room for panels to breathe. He trusts his artists to fill in the blanks, and he doesn't have to tell so much as he allows them to show. The other thing is the emotional weight that's being driven here on T'Challa. You can tell that you can feel everything that is on his shoulders, being the new king of his kingdom, knowing the stakes that are at hand here with the Moon and Night brothers attacking, and what it means to him to defend his people and defend his land. It's a well-paced issue. The artwork lifts it up here. You could definitely tell that they're a creative team that really work well together. They trust each other, and they have equal parts, carrying that heavy load. So, Ultimate Black Panther, excellent continuation of the storyline. All right, moving on, we have Dead X-Men number 3, written by Steve Fox with a litany of artists here, including Bernard Chang, Javier Pena, Lian Yoshi, and David Bardion. This is an absolute fun concept. This honestly should have been a book that was explored way earlier in the Krakoa era. This book has a team of X-Men, and they're navigating their way through the 9 lives of Moira that previously existed before the 10th life that we know as it is today. It's such a cool, fun concept that I can't believe wasn't explored previously here, but you see all the different ways that the Marvel Universe could have played out previously. Now, one of the hindrances of this issue in particular is that it is very, very reliant on your knowledge of what's going on right now in the fall of the House of X and the rise of the Powers of 10. If you're not keeping up with those books, this is going to seem a little bit exposition heavy because it's trying to fill in the blanks that a reader might need to understand what the heck is going on. Now, I'm happy to say that by the end of the issue, it starts picking up the pace and it starts building up the stakes of everything that's going on here. Now, the unfortunate truth is that with 4 artists listed on this book, though, it starts off well, and it kind of starts to fizzle a little bit, and you're drawn out of the experience, seeing the changing styles overall. So, Dead X-Men, picking up the pace, but might leave a little bit left on the plate. Speaking of the Fall of the House of X, we have a new issue that came out here, Fall of the House of X, number 3, written by Jerry Duggan with artwork by Lucas Warnock and Jethro Morales. So the first note I have when I was reading this is that things actually happen. If you watched my previous episode here, I talked about Jerry Duggan on the recent issue of X-Men, and I called it a kicking the can down the road kind of issue. And prior issues of this series have been somewhat the same here. I'm happy to say we have progression, though. Things are actually happening, characters are moving along, they're doing things. It was really nice to see Cyclops take a heroic action and kind of be a leader, regardless of the fact that he was not with his team. You saw him, taking the reins of the actions that are taking place on here without giving too many spoilers away. Um, with that being said, though, the resolution comes really easy. The team kind of bands together. They take on the foes at hand here, and these are the same people that absolutely decimated the mutants. They took everything away from them: their home, their land, their livelihood. And this offers a resolution that happens in a way that, quite frankly, makes me think, why didn't they just do this to begin with? Now, the other thing is that this is an action packed issue. There's a lot of things going on with this, but Lucas Wernick is a great artist. But with such an energetic issue, I don't see that carry over with the lettering, especially ways that they could have really utilized the automatopoeias of all the action that was taking place. Now, maybe we're spoiled with artists like Daniel Warren Johnson actually penciling in these sound effects and the actions that take place, but this needed something. It needed an oomph that was going to really bring those action scenes to life here, as opposed to just a font overlaid on an optic blast. It needed a little bit something more. I'm happy to say that it was much better than the previous issues here, and things are happening here. But overall, it's a little bit mid tier, and I'm hoping that they can finish out strong. Speaking of finishing strong, the next issue that we have is Avengers Twilight #4 by Chip Zdarsky with artwork by Daniel Kuna. Now, the best thing about this book is that Chip understands who he's writing. He understands the voices of all these characters. He understands the motivation of all these characters. Not only that, but he knows the way to play with them, and he knows the way to pull at heartstrings and take tropes that we would anticipate in comics, and he really tries to turn them on their head and really take our anticipation and twist it, right, to make something surprising. When we see in previous issues Cap giving a speech, we've been trained by comics, and especially with the MCU recently, when Cap gives a speech, that's the rally call. That tells everyone it's time to take action. And when we see that not taking place, that really goes to show the world that we're living in. Now, this is really another great example of establishing the stakes in a really good story. We've been set up with who the villain is. We know the machinations that are coming into play. And this is where everything really comes to a head. We know where the end game is going to be pointing. We know what the heroes need to do to really, come to the point where they need to get to. They know how to defeat the enemy. But there's a lot of emotional stakes at play here, especially when it comes to the fact that they have reestablished who were the Avengers, albeit in a new age, a little bit older, some of them not necessarily in the same state that they had been left in previously. Also, we see parentage come into play, and we see the weight that can come with that, especially with Tony and his son. The only negative I really have to say on this book is that the previous issues were so vibrant and bright. It kind of really it showed you this new future world that we were in, and we knew that it was not dystopian necessarily, but it was definitely a tyrannical state that was in play. Everyone was kind of had this facade of this beautiful world that they were living in. Granted, it's all been a lie. So it's not a bad thing that the coloring is dark in this issue, because it really plays into what's happening within the story. It's appropriate, but in comparison to the previous issues that were so vibrant, it is a juxtaposition that is a little bit jarring here. But overall, this is a fantastic issue to a fantastic series. I can't wait to read the next one. What are you all thinking? All right, next up on the list here, we have a brand new #1 here with the indies, Napalm Lullaby, written by Rick Remender with artwork by Bengal. Now, this is the same creative team that previously had worked together on Death or Glory, so I was really excited to dive into this and see what they had in store for us. Rick Remender, quite honestly, has never let me down. He has been a fantastic writer and artist previously, over a litany of series, right? And with his Giant Generator imprint at Image Comics, he's just continued that trend over and over and over. Now, the funny thing about this, and I had this written down in my notes here, is that the story beats on this. I said, it's just kind of like, what if Henry Rollins wrote Inception? And what I mean by that is that we have come accustomed to the the thought patterns of Rick Remender when he writes. He has a punk rock aesthetic that always just kind of bleeds through in almost everything that he writes, whether it be his anti-authority viewpoints on things or just even the work ethic that he puts forward. It's a really punk rock ethos that he lives by, and you can see it in his writing. Now, the cool thing about this book is that it kind of starts with a Superman allegory, the origin story, with a couple, coming across an infant child here, and adopting it. We don't necessarily know what happens from there, but what we do know is that the future state in this particular world is definitely authoritative, with religious undertones, and it looks to be like maybe this is more in line with almost a Red Sun Superman kind of allegory, as opposed to the straight Clark Kent turning into the Superman that we know out of Smallville. Now, the story follows a character here, as they're trying to make somewhat of a shady deal. You can tell something isn't quite right going on here. And honestly, one of the hindrances of the story is that we know there's certain characters that show up on the cover that are probably going to be our main protagonists. And I understand that a foundation needs to be laid to tell a successful story, but the main characters really don't show up until we get to about the halfway point. That's not to say it's a bad thing. We definitely need more issues to see where this is going to take us. But it did feel like I didn't know where I was supposed to go. Who am I watching? What am I following here? Um, I think it lays some groundwork, and I think there's some really cool things here. Rick Remender has always written great dialogue, so that's been easy. It's been flowing, but it kind of left me wondering. Okay, why should I care just yet? He's going to give me those reasons. I'm very, very faithful that that's going to happen. But Napalm Lullaby, what were y'all thinking? All right, for our runner-up pick of the week, I'm going with Helen of Wyndhorn, #1 by Tom King and Bilquis Everly. What's a fantastic introductory issue. The first thing I have to say is that Everly is swinging for the fences. This book is just absolutely gorgeous. If you did not have a single word in this, I would buy a 100 issue run without a shadow of a doubt. The the cross hatching and the texture that she brings to her artwork, it's just fantastic, and it goes across every single thing in this book here, whether it be the brickwork in the manor, or the gardenery, the greenery that grows along the manor, or just the smoke that's billowing off of the cigarette of our main character Helen as she's smoking on a train. Everything has texture. It has feeling. You can see it on the page. It gives the illusion everything is moving and alive, and it's just so gorgeous here. To give an example, I think this page really kind of does the best justice. So the other thing on here that you probably notice, especially with those two pages, is that Mateus Lopez is on color here, and the colors just pop. Everything is just vibrant and appropriate for each page, especially with those two pages with the juxtaposition. Much of this issue is all about the traveling that's been being taken place as Helen goes from the place that she starts the story to back to Wyndhorn Manor, and a lot of that is nighttime train rides, right? So it's a dark color palette that they're using as they travel, because they're traveling by night. But as soon as they get to the manor, it's daytime, and it's lush and it's green, and everything is just vibrant and just so colorful. Later on in the issue, when you see the story play out as well, there is I don't want to give too many spoilers away, but there's something that takes place that really frightens Helen quite a bit. There's some nighttime attacks that take place here. When those things happen, the coloring just makes everything pop. And Everly's artwork, again, is just so appropriate, and it really hits hard. This is a very heavy read. This one took me the longest to get through of all the books that I've had this week. Now, with that being said, the narration was absolutely appropriate, though. The nature of the story is a retelling from someone in present day telling the transpirings that happened throughout the comic that we're going to be reading here. And it really helps develop not only the character that is narrating, but also the characters around them. You get a sense of who these people are, and maybe the viewpoints and kind of the feelings that people have about them, rather than just seeing the narrator's own viewpoints here. Now, with that being said, the only problem that I've had with this is that sometimes with the narration boxes, it's a little bit difficult to actually make out the words that are being said here. So I believe Clayton Cowles was on lettering on here. It's not bad by any means, but I think it leaves a little bit something to be desired. The dialogue boxes are great when they're speaking to one another. That pops. But when the narration, the caption boxes hit for the narrator that's speaking from the future, it's a little bit muddied here, especially with the color palette that's maybe used for those narration boxes. I think maybe that could be tweaked. But overall, this was just such a fun introductory issue. I'm going to be along for the ride here, and I can't wait to find out what all of this means here, especially with the cliffhanger ending. So, Helen of Wyndhorn, what are you all thinking? All right, and with that, it is time for my top pick. This week's top pick, The One Hand, issue number 2, written by Ram V with artwork by Lawrence Campbell. This was an awesome follow-up. Now, anyone who knows me knows that I'm a big fan of Ram V's work. I've read, I think, just about everything that he's done here. But issue 1, while it was a very good read, it kind of left a little bit left out there. I was kind of yearning for a little bit more. And I think that might just be the nature of the fact that he's teaming up with Dan Waters on the Six Fingers, and he didn't want to tell a story that was going to maybe paint Dan into a corner. Now, with that being said, in issue 2, it has really dialed the stakes up here. The first thing I'll say on this, are Ram and Lawrence the best writer-artist combo in comics right now? Because I would make an argument that they absolutely are. This rivals Jeff Lemire and Andrea Sorrentino on things like Gideon Falls and the recently Tenements. The artwork is just so gritty and so textured and dirty, and it's so appropriate for the story that's being written here with the futuristic neo-noir detective story that we're being taken down. The other interesting thing here is that I don't know who to give credit to, so I think I need to give credit to both of them. The paneling and the storytelling are a masterclass, specifically with the way that they're using panels to really take you deeper into what's happening within the story, not necessarily as a pacing or storytelling mechanism. But one of the things that we're seeing in these issues is that there's a certain typography that's being used by the killer that this detective is trying to hunt down. It's been at every crime scene, and it's very rectangular. There's just bits and pieces. There's square-like letters, I guess, or there's a puzzle that needs to be solved here for the typography, kind of similar to the Zodiac Killer and what they were doing. And what we're seeing on the pages of this, specifically this right here, is we can see that the panel work is actually mimicking the same shapes of the letters that need to be deciphered. So I think that's really cool. I don't know if it's a clue. I don't know if it's just a little Easter egg, but it definitely makes me want to dive in a little bit more and find out, is this maybe telling us more about the detective? Maybe something that we don't really fully understand about him himself, considering that the previous criminals that he's put away thinking that they were the murderer are now maybe not. I don't know. It's unraveling into this really cool mystery here. I can't wait to find out where it goes here. I think the team up of Ram V and Dan Waters writing these stories together has been just such a great idea. On top of that, the fact that they're writing each issue not knowing what the other person is writing, they're not letting each other get ahead of the game. It's satisfying both. It has to be satisfying for both them as the writers, because they're solving these puzzles as they get presented to them, but it makes it a more enriching experience for the reader because we're on that same journey. And if they don't know the next step, there's no way that we're going to be led to know the next step. We're going to have our clues, we're going to have our thoughts on it, but there's no way that we can get too far ahead of the game and be spoiled by it. So, with that being said, The One Hand number 2 is my pick of the week. So that's what I got for you this week. Next week brings a couple new number 1s here, a couple continuation of some indie stories, a couple big 2 books that I'm really excited to see what happens, but I'm more curious. What are you thinking? What did you read? Do me a favor, be part of the panel, leave a comment down below and let me know what you're thinking. If you found any value in this, do me a favor, subscribe and like this video and let me know your thoughts. So that's what I've been thinking though. Hope to see you in the next video. Thanks a lot.